CDBG program. Chris Lussier from the Michigan State Housing Development Authority is our expert and going to be leading us through a 30-minute presentation on what we need to know about the most recent round and give us some pointers. And then we'll have some time afterwards for questions. And I would love at that time if, there are experts from our region who have a grant and would like to speak up to do so at that time as well. But otherwise, I'm going to hand it over to Chris. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Emily. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Is my screen coming through?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. All right, so I'm Chris Lussier. I'm the Community Development Block Grant Manager in the Neighborhood Development Division of MISHDA. And our primary product is the My Neighborhood grant. Essentially, we've taken all of the various grant programs that we used to administer out of the old Community Development Division and rolled them into one program. The program is a blend of state and federal funds. And so the state funds launched at the beginning of October, and those are you can access those funds now and apply for those funds now. I'm here to talk about the federal funding, which is community development block grant funding that we receive from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And those funds can only be accessed by units of general local government. And so I spent a lot of my time talking to local governments about how they can access and use these funds for housing activities. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I know I've presented a lot in Region J and talked to a lot of Region J stakeholders, and you know, Emily's been really active in getting the word out over the last couple of years. So I would say we probably have more grantees in Region J than any other region in the state, or will soon have. With the recent round of funding, I think we had more applicants from Region J than any other region in the state. So very excited to, and also I live in Region J, very excited. I mean, just see Region J so well represented. My presentation today, I'll give a little bit of overview just to make sure that we don't leave anybody behind, but really want to talk about how folks can access the funds and what our process is like to give people a sense of what's involved. So that's what we'll focus on. So I mentioned that only units of general government can apply for the funds. This map here shows the areas in blue are all the areas that can apply for the resources. If folks already received resources directly from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, then they can't access the state's funds because they have their own funding. So in Region J, that's places like the city of Battle Creek, city of Benton Harbor, Kalamazoo, and so forth. Those are the red dots in Region J there at the bottom. But any of the townships, villages, smaller cities, or counties or county land banks within Region J are able to access these funds. The way that we make our funds available is we launch a letter of intent window where for 30 days you can submit a letter of intent. It's essentially 14 questions, half of which are who are you and where are you from? A short synopsis of your grant idea and what sort of activity and how much money you're looking to receive. And you submit that letter, and then we review those. We typically do some consultations, sometimes by email, sometimes in person. The consultations are relatively short, maybe anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. And then based off of that information, we make a decision about whether or not to reserve funds. And what we do is then set aside funds that will award to you once you've made full and complete application. And then you have up to 4 months to work on completing that application and submitting it to us. And then after that time, we review those applications. We may come back and ask you to make modifications. Typically, modifications are things that can be cured within 7 business days. And then uh, and then after that, we move on to grant agreement. And really, once you've um, got a designation memo from us, so once your letter of intent's been approved and we've set aside the funds for you, you're no longer in a competitive process. You're merely trying to make threshold with your application. And if you're able to meet that minimum threshold, then you move forward in the process. So it gives local communities some confidence that if they're going to invest the time in trying to build capacity to be able to implement a housing grant or put the work into completing a full application, that the funds are reserved for them uh, and they're set aside and it'll be worth their while. So that's a sort of an overview of the process. The process launches on November 3rd. It'll run for 30 days until or 31 days till December 4th. And as long as we continue to have funds, we will continue to have funding windows. And so we probably will take some time off during the holidays while we're evaluating the letters of intent and doing consultations, and then open up again a month later in January if we have additional resources, and then give people an opportunity to submit another letter of intent. This chart here shows the regional allocations. So for this coming round, we have $30 million available. And this is how those funds are being targeted across the regions in the state. You can see that a lot of the regions around Detroit, so regions L, M, N, and O, all receive allocations directly from HUD. So those regions aren't eligible to apply. Region J has roughly $3.5 million allocated to it for this funding round. I would just throw out there as well, this is the money that we have available and that we're committing to right now. We likely, once we get through, we're currently evaluating applications as we're concluding the previous round, and there may be funds available that roll over from that. And so that may be a part of an announcement in the new year. We'll see. Let me just check in real quick. If there's any questions, I can't see hands, so I don't know if Emily, you want to just keep an eye on things in case there's a question about a particular slide. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have as we go. Just if you could call it out for me.
I'm happy to call out any hands I see.
Okay. And so we've talked a lot about what the eligible activities are, but I'll just recap those quickly here. So funds can be used to do a homeowner rehab program, which allows for up to $40,000 per unit of rehab. We've learned a lot from having done this for a couple of years now. One of the main concerns, we'll talk about it a little bit later, the presentation is around doing lead abatement, and there are the lead safe housing rule, some regulations do kick in when you're doing projects that that have more than $25,000 worth of assistance in them. And so a lot of folks are actually making changes to their program or designing their programs to cap it at 25,000 or 20,000 to avoid triggering those additional requirements. So, and it's not uncommon for folks to design programs to do smaller interventions. So we do have plenty of grantees that do $10,000 of assistance per unit and spread the resources over more units. So grantees have a lot of room to be able to tailor their program to meet their local need. The rent rehab program provides up to $100,000 per unit. It is based on needs. So if you're just doing a renovation of an established unit, we typically fund that up to $40,000. $100,000 is available if you're doing like the sort of redevelopment of a space where you're converting it from maybe a space above a business into residential, and then the full 100,000 per unit is available for a project like that. And this is for unoccupied residential spaces. We really have to have buildings that don't have any occupied residential units in the building. We've designed this intentionally to avoid triggering Davis-Bacon. Um, and so we will do up to 7 units. 8 units triggers Davis-Bacon, and we limit the improvements to the residential parts of a building. So you can do a mixed-use building. We encourage that, but the commercial areas have to be in a leasable state, or be occupied. Um, and the exterior parts of the building need to be sound because you can't do any improvements that benefit the commercial space. It's really focused on the units themselves. We in the past we encourage this activity like in downtown areas and along corridors into downtowns, but we're making a change for the coming year to allow this activity in other areas, provided the local community can demonstrate this is that through some formal planning process that this is a, sort of an accessible use of the area. So if if it's zoned, other areas are zoned for the kind of rental uses that you're proposing, then we're going to fund those activities moving forward. So it gives communities more flexibility in how to apply this activity. Reconstruction is for when there has been a demolition. The demolition has to have occurred within a year of when the resources are made available. So in this instance, the resources are made available in November. So it will have to have been a property that was demolished in November of 2024 or moving forward. It can be a property that has a blighted building on it and you're planning to um, demolish it. And then this gives funds to reconstruct a house on that site. It's $200,000 worth of assistance. Only $100,000 of that can be subsidy or stay in the deal. The other $100,000 has to be paid back after the sale. So it sort of functions, that second $100,000 functions like a construction mortgage or a construction loan, which just helps with building the property, but then needs to be paid back. We've in the last round, we added some activities. We now do housing infrastructure, which provides up to $75,000 per unit for essential physical improvements that directly enable an affordable housing development. This has to be property that's owned by the municipal government, so they have to own the infrastructure and maintain it. And it does have to be tied to the creation of new units. So it can't simply be, doing infrastructure improvements that support established housing units. And this could pay for things like sidewalks, water and sewer extensions, roads, parking areas. Manufactured housing, it provides up to $100,000 per unit for the acquisition of a manufactured housing unit. It doesn't cover the cost of installation or site prep. And this can only be done in instances, this only can be done where the land and the unit will be sold to a lower moderate income buyer. So it is sort of a niche activity, but it's particularly useful in some of the rural parts of Michigan, particularly up north, where you do have where this is commonplace or more commonplace, I suppose. It doesn't work in like a mobile home setting, mobile home park setting, where there's a lot rent, that kind of thing, something we see in the southern Michigan more often. But if you're interested in doing this, we've got a couple of grantees. I know that Mason County has taken a hard look at this, and this is something that they've really been trying to consider as an option for creating some low-cost, affordable housing in their area. So that's a potential option. All of these activities, the housing has to benefit low or moderate income individuals. Any instance where you're directly helping a homeowner or you're selling a house to a home buyer, every one of the units has to be 80% area median income or less. For activities where you have a multi-unit property, like the rental rehab or housing infrastructure where you may be doing improvements that are going to assist a bunch of units. In those instances, 51% of the created units have to be low or moderate income. 51%, if it's an even amount of units, like 8 units, that tilts it in favor of lower moderate income. So an 8 unit or a 6 unit project, 4 of the units would have to be 80% area median income or less. The one exception to that is if you're doing a 2-unit project, then 1 unit can be lower moderate income and the other unit would be market rate. This pie chart just shows, based on all of the applications that we've received in 2025, this is just sort of the breakdown of what activities local governments have been most interested in applying for funds for. And so 38% of requests have been for housing infrastructure projects, 37% homeowner rehab, 18% for unoccupied rental rehab. So you can see the bulk of the projects that we're funding are housing infrastructure or homeowner rehab. That's where the most of our time is spent. I covered a bit of this process information earlier. Again, the letter of intent launch will start on November 3rd. I'll show you the website in a second. The person who updates our websites and does a lot of the communications for our division has been sick, so we were trying to have this up on the website for this presentation. Unfortunately, I won't have that. I can show you the website and where it's at and how and some of what's available there. It'll be updated on the 3rd. An apply button now, but will go live on the website that you can click on to be able to fill out the letter of intent. It's an internet form that you'll fill out that has just 14 questions. It needs to be accompanied by a letter of support from your highest elected official. This is a change from previous years. And we just ask that we get that letter just to show that there is some commitment from the local government. Sometimes we have third parties that will submit information and submit a letter of intent, and they may be partnering with a local government, or in some instances, they're not even partnering with a local government. This just helps us know that we definitely have a local government that is submitting the letter of intent and expressing an interest in the program, because ultimately that is the only entity that we can fund as a grantee. So we'll also have a detailed submission guide that'll be posted to assist applicants and sort of spell out what kinds of information needs to be included in the letter of intent. It will also provide details about the entire process and the timelines. So those are all real clear. We're going to hold a Q&A session on the letter of intent on November 13th. This meeting invite will be posted to the website. And in fact, let me pull up chat real quick, because I think I could just, well, I'll post the website, put the link to the website in the chat as well. The letter of intent submission deadline is December 4th. Once we get the letter of intent, we do the consultations. We'll do those. We'll start doing those in November. I mean, one thing I should point out is we do have a 30-day window where we take letters of intent, but we start evaluating letters as soon as we get them. So this is an important piece. There is an advantage to submitting your letter of intent early, because we will continue to evaluate letters of intent until we run out of funds. And That hasn't happened. It hasn't happened yet that we've run out of funds during a funding period. That does happen with my neighborhood, or is more likely to happen with the sort of the state funding in the my neighborhood program. But there's no guarantee that we won't run out of funds. So it's just something to keep in mind that as soon as we go live, folks are encouraged to submit their letter of intent as soon as they can. We'll start evaluating those and we'll start scheduling consultations right away. Well, as soon as we're able, put it that way. And so some of those consultations will take place in November. The rest will happen in the month of December. And based off of those consultations, we'll send out uh, designation memos. In the last funding round, we had a specific date, September 17th, that everybody had to have their applications in by. And we're going to instead just give folks 4 months from the date of their designation memo. So when we send out those designation memos that reserve that funding for you, you'll also get your application deadline in that same letter. And roughly those will end up result in folks having deadlines that'll probably start sometime in March and extend through early May. And that actually helps us quite a bit because then we don't have all of this information coming in at one time and trying to evaluate all these applications at one time, which can create a bit of a bottleneck. Yeah, so the goal is to get grant agreements in place as early, like early spring, late winter. Especially if you're doing a homeowner rehab program, you know, getting going in the spring is really, really key because a lot of contractors get a lot of their work under contract early in the season, and then they're not available to respond to your bids um, later in the year. So we want to try and get folks set up as soon as we possibly can. So the goal is early spring. We've got some training opportunities coming up that the links and the information will be posted to the website this week. We have a homeowner rehab best practices session, which is really focused at folks that are just now getting grants or implementing grants currently, but it is a remote training. And so if folks are interested in homeowner rehab as an activity, they could participate in that if they'd like. The focus is really on project administration and all the various steps of doing a homeowner rehab project and how to properly document each of those steps. That's about half the session. And then the other half of the session is really dedicated to designing programs for compliance with the lead safe housing rule. We've learned a lot about uh, what it takes to use these resources in small communities to do rehab projects where the lead safe housing rule comes into play. And so we want to sort of walk through what we've learned with communities to make sure that they're doing things to design their programs to avoid triggering things that may end up regulations that may end up being onerous down the road. So, some of that is just making sure that, you're in a position to communicate with homeowners, like what are the things that might come up so that we don't create expectations that become hard to follow through on later on. How to design the program so you're not triggering some of those regulations, either by reducing the amount of assistance or thinking about the types of um, uh, projects that you take on and what kinds of repairs that you want to do or not do. And then what are some strategies if you are going to be engaging in lead activities? What are some strategies to make sure you've got the capacity to be able to do those? And what are the key steps in making sure that when you've got lead or the potential for a lead hazard on a project, what are the key steps to be able to address it? So that training is going to be focused on like a deep dive on that subject. We'll probably offer that every funding round because one of our coming out of this last funding round, we really felt like that's an area that every time we're bringing on new grantees that are going to do homeowner rehab, those are topics that we want to talk through with folks while they're designing their program. So we're going to offer it now for the folks that are getting their grants, but we'll probably do it again early in the year next year, just to go over those topics with new applicants that are looking at designing a homeowner rehab program. We're likely to do similar sessions on rental rehab and infrastructure moving forward. And if we do, those will likely happen, February or March of next year. We have a CDBG Basics for new grantees. It's an in-person training. Participation in this is limited, and we are prioritizing new grantees and their partners. So we are prioritizing folks that are being awarded grants right now rather than folks that are submitting letters of intent. We expect come next May when we have the housing conference in Lansing that we may have some kind of offering like we did this past year, another training that folks will be able to avail themselves of if you're applying for a grant now. But I did want to lift it up because I know that we've got some folks on the call today that are going to be doing, implementing a grant or in the process of applying right now. So. And then one of the changes that we're going to be implementing is we have hired a consultant that's going to do the tier 1 environmental review for all of our homeowner rehab grants moving forward. And so I'm not sure how much this is going to benefit folks that are getting grants right now, but for everyone who applies in the future, this environmental consultants will be doing a regional environmental review which covers the tier 1 review, and that'll greatly reduce the burden on local governments for having to do environmental review. There still will be a tier 2 environmental checklist that'll have 4 or 5 or 6 items depending on the region, maybe more, but a much smaller list of environmental questions that'll have to be resolved at the local level. And we'll be doing training in early spring for all homeowner rehab grantees that will on how to do those tier 2 reviews put on by that consultant. So this is responding to a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from grantees that we've had over the last couple of years with CDBG grants, concerns about doing the environmental review work. And it's folks have found environmental consultants. A lot of folks have hired environmental consultants to do that work for them. But that can be very costly, or there's a lot of effort in trying to procure those consultants. So we're hoping to do away with a lot of that, and this should hopefully streamline things for folks. And I'm almost done here. I just got a slide or two more. I just wanted to cover a little bit of like, what do we do inside of the consultation or the letter of intent process what are we really looking at? And how are we using those things to determine whether we want to commit funds or set aside funds to a local government for a period of 4 months while they make application. And the big thing for us is just ensuring that we've got, an eligible activity and to assess the readiness to be able to implement that activity. So the key evaluation criteria for us are, does the grantee have the capacity to administer this program, whether they're doing it themselves with existing staff, or are they going to go out and partner or, procure someone to come in and help them run it? And this gives us an opportunity to sort of kick the tires a little bit and see what your plan is and make sure it seems sound and that you've got a high level of confidence in it and we feel good about it. We will look at the project planning to ensure that it's progressed enough to support a full application within 4 months. And I'll cover that in a little more detail in a second. And then we just want to make sure that you've got a funding strategy in place for activities that are going to require additional funds to complete, or if there's some kind of like leverage requirement, that those funds are in place at the time, by the time the full application is submitted. And so sometimes, particularly like on an infrastructure project, or actually, so we've had it on reconstruction projects where folks will be like, well, we've got a good portion of the funding in place, but we're going to go out and fundraise for this last 10%. And in those situations, we'll ask you to come back when you've got all of the funds ready. So we really do require all funds be in place at the time that the application is submitted. And then just in terms of how those consultations look, just looking at the two most popular activities, and also just the sort of easiest activity to implement and the most complicated. Homeowner rehab consultations, we're typically just making sure that folks understand what the key roles are in implementing this program idea, that they've got some kind of plan in place to handle compliance with lead safe housing. We're not expecting people to be experts at the early stage, but we'll lift some of those issues up, and that they've got a a contractor recruitment plan. So some really elementary or basic questions as a part of that LOI. In a lot of cases, we just handle this through an email, some email correspondence. For housing infrastructure, we take more time and ask more questions. And we first and foremost need to make sure that we've got an eligible use of the funds. Um, Folks have a lot of different ideas about how to use the infrastructure dollars. And so some work and some don't. Some need to be modified. And so this ensures that we've got an eligible use before we proceed. Um, we've learned a lot from doing housing infrastructure the first go around. So we'll be bringing that to those conversations. We want to make sure that folks have site control or a plan to have site control by the time of application, and that applies to both the infrastructure that they're going to own and then the land where that is, and then also if there's housing that needs to be created, that the housing that there's a developer out there with site control. That the projects are properly zoned for future development, that all improvements will be publicly owned when they're done. Just establish that and confirm it. That there's a plan, the planning has progressed enough that we know that there'll be stamped engineering and plans and specs, that phase 1 and 2 environmental work will be complete at the time of application. And this is a key step because a lot of folks haven't got far enough. By the time they've submitted a letter of intent, they may not be far enough along that they can provide these things within a 4-month window. So a lot of folks, 6 months ago when we sat down with them, realized they were going to need to take more time and then plan and come in for the future funding round. And we expect to see them this fall. So that's one thing that, this won't be for every project. And it does sort of demand that some of these projects that, in a lot of instances, there needs to have been some pre-work that's been done in order for them to be ready in 4 months. And then, we ensure that the funding for both the infrastructure and the housing are fully committed by the time of application. And so in an LOI, you may not have it now, but we just want to hear what's your plan and do we have high level confidence in that plan? And then we just want to make sure that there's no incompatible sources of funding in your plan. So we aren't pairing our infrastructure dollars with LIHTC funds, for example. So we usually will talk through your funding strategy and make sure that we can pair our CDBG funds with your other sources of funding. And that's what I've got right now. Emily asked me that I would pull up the website as well, just so some of the resources there. Emily, do you still want me to do that real quick? Or I know I kind of went a little long there.
Oh, no, you're fine. I thought it was perfect timing, and if you could, I thought you could, yeah,
Okay.
pull up the website and just show where some of the primary resources are.
Yeah.
And then if you're thinking of questions or have questions, get those ready.
Okay. So let me. Pull up the website. So uh, I actually go to the website by Googling MISTA CDBG. It's the first hit. Click on it. It takes you to this page. And I'll put the link in chat as soon as I get a second. And my presentation, I made it. I sent it to Emily so she can disseminate it. It also will have the link in there. But this is the landing page for the community development block grant funds. Right here in this section, right up front, is where you will see the Submit Now button and all of the information that details the process for the coming round of funding. Right now, we do have the regional allocation chart here. The timeline that's on the website right now is the timeline that's currently being implemented for letters of intent that were submitted last June. So we're still concluding that process, and we'll be doing grant agreements here in the next month. So that'll be coming down, and we'll have a new timeline up. At the very bottom are a bunch of training resources that are pretty helpful. First and foremost, there's a link to the policy manual. You can Google MISHDA CDBG policy manual, and the first hit takes you to our policy manual webpage. It looks like this. We are actually in the midst of a major rewrite of our policy manual. The rules aren't changing, but the layout's going to change, and the I think we're working to make it more accessible and more step by step. And so we've got some outside consultants helping us with that piece to try and make it more accessible to grantees. So hopefully we'll see some improvements there. But in terms of how it's set up currently, it lists the various chapters are by subject area. And you can click on a chapter. When you do, the first line will be the text of that chapter, and then all of the attachments, which are often, in this instance, for the overview, it's our quick finders, which give an overview or all of the requirements for every eligible activity that we can fund. But other resources like maps, tools, forms, model documents are all included in these sections. So something like construction management, you'll get, waiver templates and, a change order template, inspection checklist, different things that can help you manage construction. So see, another piece that folks check out regularly is the third-party administrator and developer section. The chapter is going to cover how to hire a third-party administrator. There's a nice piece in here, a grant management plan that basically walks you through what are all the different roles and responsibilities that someone's going to have to take on when we implement our grant. And it's just a tool that will walk you through thinking about how, what things are you going to have to cover. It can be really useful if you're going to do an RFP for some of the services that you're going to need to provide. If you want to hire a third-party administrator, this can help you think about what are the things the third-party administrator will do and what are the things that we'll do. That's there. Other things, these quick finders are also available in the other resources section. I can just give you an idea of what one of these looks like. For the homeowner rehab activity, I covered it in like a paragraph or two during the presentation, but you can see here, it goes into detail about, who can apply, who are the households that you're serving, what properties are eligible, what are the requirements that folks are going to have to demonstrate in order to demonstrate that the property is eligible for the program, what are the different kinds of eligible costs associated with the program, what regulations might apply. We do, have some requirements for like a lien that goes on the property if you receive assistance more than $10,000. That gets forgiven, and there are no payments. It gets forgiven after 5 years, but this just sort of lays out those terms, that kind of thing. So it gives you an idea of, and for each one of the activities, this is actually one of the simpler activities. The rental rehab one, I think, is about 5 pages long, so it provides quite a bit of detail about how to implement that activity. So.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, sure.
I appreciate it. Are there any questions for Chris at this time?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, thanks, Emily. Sorry, Seth here. Good to see you, Chris, and thank you for the presentation. I'm curious about one thing. I know this was CDBG focused, but for those communities that are applying or put in a letter of intent into the My Neighborhood program, the way I understand it is that you designate some will be HCDF state funded, and some are going to be CDBG federally funded. How do you make that determination, or how is MISHDA making that determination right now?
Yeah. So if folks are just applying for CDBG funds, then I recommend you just wait and submit a letter of intent on November 3rd. If But folks we have like a no wrong door practice, so folks can submit their application through My Neighborhood, and they'll just be treated as a letter of intent. It's an easier process to simply fill out the letter of intent and move forward that way. But if you're already submitting a grant for state funds and you're going to do some state funds and apply for some CDBG funds, then you can just do it all through My Neighborhood. That's fine.
Okay, and sorry again, I guess this is where I need a little bit of clarity, and I'm happy to take this offline too sometime. But for a community, we work primarily with these rural communities, right? So for a community that's wanting the state funds because of up to 120% AMI, more flexible funding, easier to administer, for those communities, what are the recommended steps for applying?
So, so if you're applying, so if a local government is applying for funds for an activity that could be funded with CDBG, then you're going to be required to take CDBG funds. So
Okay.
if they're doing homeowner rehab, for example, they won't have the option of submitting for a homeowner rehab program with like all the reasons. I understand all the reasons, but the decision's been made here at MISTA to limit that. Local governments, if they want to apply for, if it's an activity that isn't eligible under CDBG, so say you want to do new construction, which isn't allowable under CDBG, then a local government can apply for My Neighborhood funds for that activity. So
okay.
So
I hear that, and thank you for that.
yeah.
That's ultimately the answer that I've been looking for in a very clear and concise way, and I appreciate that because again, low capacity communities, I understand the CDBG funding, and it's still something to be celebrated. It's up to $25,000, right? But the reality is, for so many of these communities that are low capacity, they are being thrown CDBG funding when the housing stock in these rural communities really needs the investment and the flexibility of that My Neighborhood HCDF state funded program. Also, just for the 120% AMI to be able to make that impact. So I know that it's for housing rehab, and I understand that, but whenever that decision is being revisited, I would love to be a part of that conversation or to offer some input as to why rural communities shouldn't just be thrown the CDBG funding. And again, not trying to diminish the CDBG funding, but just advocating again on behalf of low capacity rural communities that are trying to make an impact. So that's
I mean, so I hear that, and I think if I would definitely avail yourself of any like Q&A sessions or opportunity, like if there is a public hearing or something like that where you can submit that feedback. I mean, you're welcome to submit it in writing to the MISTA-NDD@michigan.gov website, which is the division website or the division email box, and we do lift that up. Or what I would say is I think we're trying to figure out how to make these resources, stretch these out to be able to do the most good. And rural communities can partner with nonprofit partners or others to be able to implement some of these activities if they want to go that route. And there is a tremendous amount of good that folks can do with CDBG funds.
absolutely.
I think it does come with some additional rules. We have some small communities, we have some big communities that struggle with those rules, but we have small communities, lots of examples of small communities and big communities who are doing these well. And also on our end, I think we can make some of this easier and solve some of these challenges that we're facing. So yeah, I hear you, and I'll relay that I heard that again today, for sure.
Thanks, Chris. You're still sharing your screen as well. So we
Oh,
just see your back.
am I? My bad.
Okay,
Yeah.
Alexis, has a question. She says, am I hearing correctly that if uh, a local unit of government applies for homeowner rehab through this program in the IGX application, they will automatically be put in the CDBG funding bucket?
Yeah, if a local government applies for my neighborhood for homeowner rehab, the option for local governments for my neighborhood is CDBG funds. I mean, no one else can access those resources except for local governments. And so that's the avenue. And I never use Zoom, so I actually someone's have to tell me where the button is.
There should be a bar.
I have a share button.
Should be able, that share button should also have a like exit as well.
Yeah,
That's okay. Here, I'll share my screen.
Thank you. And then you can get rid of it. Appreciate it.
Please ask more questions, but while we have about 5 minutes left, I'm just showing you the new Regional Housing Partnership website. This is where recordings like this and other recordings, we have a 101 from land banks. We also have community land trusts. All of that information can be found in our resources tab here, where you'll find videos that will link to different, as well as events. So if you want to know if there's housing events locally or across the state, we'll post those here and you can find and get more information on what we're doing in the working groups or otherwise. And this banner right here is for that survey I've already linked to. So please check out the website if you have time and learn more about the Regional Housing Partnership. What other questions do we have for Chris before we wrap up? Seth has there been any conversations about collaboration with Eagle to take advantage of the Am I Her? Actually, I'm not from, I can elaborate if needed, he says. I'm not familiar with that program, Seth, but Chris, do you know what he's talking about?
No, I'm not familiar with it either.
MIHER?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Again, sorry for all the questions, Chris. But again, and to revisit that, I don't want to diminish the CDBG funding at all. And again, thank you for the presentation today. So, but we work with some contractors. One of the contractors is a Michigan home energy rebate specific contractor who said that they have a walkaway clause for so many of these homes. So the home rehab partnership and being able to go in and identify some of these rehab opportunities with these the housing stock within a community, they specifically have to walk away because energy efficiency improvements, new windows, new doors, insulation, interior projects, they have to walk away because a roof needs to be repaired. So what they're asking is there a way for Eagle and MISHDA to collaborate, since the eligibility is 80% AMI or less? All of our CDBG recipients are 80% AMI or less. All they need is a letter that says, yep, they qualified, they're income verified, and they would come in after a building inspection to do a home energy evaluation. So I'm curious, one, if you knew about the MyHer program, and then two, if there's a way for us to stack these funds, because if we can say, hey, we're going to prioritize the roof so that these guys can come in and we're not able to touch the windows because of lead and abatement rules, is there a way for us to stack the programs and to make even more impact in our communities? That's something that a contractor brought to us, and I was like, this is great. So I don't know if there's been conversations like that.
Yeah. So I mean, there's weatherization programs, there's lead abatement programs offered through MDHHS. I mean, there are a lot of other resources out there. We are working on a pilot that will attempt more sort of whole home solutions that draws on a number of different resources. So I don't want to, and so I will say we're going to do some work around that. It's a pilot though, and it's not something that's going to generally be the case. I would say that local grantees, if they're able to make some of those connections at the local level, which actually is sometimes where this stuff can come together the best, they're more than welcome to do it. I mean, the income verifications, for example. I mean, MISTA isn't doing the income verifications. It's the local government that's doing them, and they're the ones that would then be saying, "Hey, we can demonstrate that they meet that income requirement and provide the documentation of that to another program to be able to help them qualify." Um, so there are some challenges with doing it. I mean, I've got a lot of experience of doing it in Battle Creek, where we would take local CDBG funds and pair them with lead abatement dollars, which made a lot of sense because, um, lead abatement programs might be able to do a little bit of incidental rehab work, but they couldn't take care of a whole roof, right? And if the roof's not in good shape, they don't want to put a bunch of money in abating the lead if it's just going to leak and cause more problems. So the pairing made a lot of sense. The trick was getting the timing of the various programs to work, the release of funds, and what was an unfortunate consequence and take some real intentional planning is how to get the timing to line up. Because what ended up happening in a lot of instances with those projects that paired funds ended up getting delayed longer and longer and longer. So there are some challenges with doing it. I don't want to discourage folks from doing it. I think we're going to try and we're doing a pilot program where we've got some consultants from HUD coming in to help us think about what are some of the complexities and how to tackle them. And I think we'll learn a lot about how we might be able to do that at the state level. So thanks for lifting up the Eagle program though, because I didn't know about that. Others may hear, but I didn't know. So thank you.
And Katie Montoya says, big dreams here, but I would ideally like to have HUD update the lead rule and increase the threshold to allow interim control at 40K instead of 25.
Yeah, or 50. Yeah, I am like, yep. I mean, I'm totally on board with that. And I'm all about advocating for that. So I think that gets to the crux of the problem, that the lead regs were done 30 years ago. So
yes, yep. So we got some love for that comment. But we are at time, and I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their valuable day. If you have more questions for Chris, can they reach out to you or?
Yeah, they can. I mean, the MISTA-CDBG mailbox is great. That's MISTA-CDBG@michigan.gov.
Okay.
And we'll respond to those questions. We're happy to do a consultation. We've done them in the past. So if you want to meet via Teams, we're happy to schedule some time to talk through your idea.
And if you're interested in more peer-to-peer conversations, I know this one wasn't as much of a peer-to-peer conversation, but we got some really great information from Chris, and I wanted to make sure that we use this time wisely. Please sign up on that Google form, and I will get you connected, and hopefully we'll see you at our housing funding and asset mapping event this November 17th. But thank you, everyone, and take care. Thank you, Chris.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.